Wave hello.
Hello.
Hi everybody.
I'm here.
Here we are again with another edition of Family Storytelling. Okay, I put a little note out to some of the tribe to find out if there were any questions or any topics that we could talk on. Now, in my conversations with Debbie, it's always so funny because I call her Deborah or Deb, and when you call her Debbie, it makes me laugh. It's like, wow, I never heard anybody call her Debbie.
Well, she's been that since she was a little girl.
Right,
so.
sure, and it's kind of fun for me because I'm not used to that. Okay, so when I was talking with her, one of the things that she said that made me interested was that her dad really never talked at all about his times in the service. Yeah. He didn't really talk much about his experiences in the service. So that was one thing that's a point of curiosity already in me. Were there any like interesting stories or things that he poured his heart out to you about from his times in the service? Because I know that's one thing that Deb kind of always wondered and prayed about.
Well, he just looked at it as his job. It was his job. And
now, see the little green dot
okay,
there?
Look at the green dot.
That represents people's eyes right there.
Okay. He looked at the military as his job. That's what he did. Mm-hmm. And he started out as a basic aircraft mechanic, worked his way up to being a crew chief on the big KC-135s. And in fact, he even...
What's a KC-135?
It's an air refueling tanker. Anybody in my family knows what a KC-135 is.
An air refueling tanker.
Yes.
That means a gigantic plane that holds enormous amounts of fuel. And
which they offload to smaller planes, or even to the big B-52s, the big bombers.
While they're flying. So
yes.
In the air, there's this big gas tanker, and it's got this thing that goes down and connects with another plane while they're flying.
It's called a drogue.
A what?
Drogue.
That's
a drogue.
That's the pipe?
No, it's really more of a... It's not really a pipe. You'd have to see it to understand it.
Okay. So this is like two machines connected in the air flying along. Wow. That's pretty amazing. So he's working on...
flying. Yeah.
So he's working on those. Precision flying. Wow.
Okay. His job with the KC, in fact, with the KC-35s, he picked up, he said the first one from the factory. It was one of the, I know the very first ones because of the tail numbers. But he said first, and he had to actually go to the factory to learn about the systems on the airplane so that he knew how to take care of it.
Wow.
And he worked as a crew chief on that plane. He was very proud of his airplanes. Was often called Mr. Clean because he insisted that everything on his airplanes be done right. Nothing was left undone. There was no trashy stuff left around. Everything was clean. He wanted to be proud of that airplane he was in charge of. And so he didn't do much flying those first years. Most of his work was on the ground. He was involved in one of his big things he was involved with that KC-135 was a speed run going from Westover Air Force Base in Massachusetts to England. And they actually set a new world speed record at that time for jet flying. Unfortunately, one of the tankers involved in this situation, they overloaded with fuel and it crashed on takeoff. And they lost a crew.
Whoa.
But he was safe. Somehow God always kept him safe.
Huh.
But he had several times he flew with the aircraft, and when the aircraft were in certain situations, they would send a few of them overseas to be there on a temporary assignment, and he would go with his airplane on those times. He didn't go with them on every mission, but when they went somewhere and they were going to be stationed there any length of time, he went with that airplane. He worked his way up to the point of becoming a quality control inspector, which means he went around and inspected everybody's aircraft, and anything he wasn't happy with, they had to fix.
Wow.
So, and that's where, after we got stationed in Arkansas, we didn't realize what his nickname was among all the crews that worked on the aircraft until one day one of the young men stopped at my father's service station to get gas. And they were griping and complaining about this guy they called Mr. Clean. And my dad asked them what they were talking about. They said, well, this Sergeant Evans guy, he's just such a nitpicker. He just wants everything to be perfect on his planes and not a spot of dirt anywhere. He wants them to be just perfect, Mr. Clean, And so my father-in-law laughs and says, yeah, that's my son-in-law. So that was always a good joke among the family. We left there and we went to California where he started working on the C-141s as a flight engineer. That was his first job actually flying, where he was in the air every time the aircraft went up. And they didn't always fly the same airplanes, okay? So whatever airplane they were on.
Okay, so what does a flight engineer mean?
He was basically
like
in charge.
the chief mechanic while there's a flight going on?
It involved a lot more than that. It involved fuel management on the aircraft. And I don't know all the things.
So it's like maintenance
the technical end of what was happening with the airplane while it was flying.
Neat.
The pilot and co-pilot were in charge of actually moving the airplane where it had to go.
Yeah.
The navigator had to be sure it was going to the right place. Okay.
But he's in charge of all the technical aspects.
The technical stuff. He's got this big board in front of him, shows him every fuel tank and what's going, so that they could move from one fuel tank to another to keep the airplane balanced. This sort of thing.
Wow, that's so neat.
So that was what he did there until they decided that he needed to go to Vietnam. He had like 2 years left to go, or a little over 2 years at the point they decided that. And so they sent him off to school in Tennessee, which was close to where my family lived. And he went over there a few weekends while he was there. And one weekend, I got to say, one weekend he went over when my mother was in Mississippi visiting her relatives. My dad was there alone. So he's there. He gets up. He makes breakfast for my dad. He's cleaning up the kitchen, doing all this work. It's like, my dad can't believe there's a man who will do all these things because my dad was the male chauvinist type. That's not man's work. So, he would do the laundry. He'd do whatever needed to be done. And so that was just my husband. He stepped in where he needed to be where he needed to. So that year he spent in Vietnam, flying on this little plane. I can't remember what it was called right now. I could look it up and find out. But anyway, they called them the Goonie Birds, okay? And the planes actually belonged to the Army, but they had Air Force crews flying on them.
Okay.
And his job on that little plane was as a loadmaster, which means he was in charge of stowing all the cargo where it went and making sure the weight was balanced on the aircraft, whatever. A lot of times they carried animals, people, all kinds of cargo, including some hazardous materials, and unfortunately bringing out sometimes wounded and dead bodies. So they carried all kinds of stuff. Couple of missions that he went on
and the type of plane is a Goonie bird?
That was a nickname because it looked so weird. It was a weird looking aircraft.
Okay.
But it was a small cargo plane.
Okay.
And it had the side doors, but it had a big opening in the back where you could actually drive like a Jeep or something up inside it.
Okay, so look up Goonie bird and you'll see some pictures of a Goonie bird. Okay.
So anyway, his 2 big missions over there that he got his big decorations for involved a rescue mission of some Army troops who were pinned down by the Viet Cong. They were running out of food, water, and ammunition. And so they sent an emergency thing to go in there. He made 2 of those. They called them airdrops, where they're actually dropping out stuff while the plane is flying. And it involved one type of plane going in and laying down a layer of napalm between our troops and the Viet Cong. And if you've ever been around, that stuff burns fresh, hot, thick black smoke, building up from it.
Yeah.
And his job was to stand at the back of that airplane. I'm sure he was anchored in where he couldn't fall out. But his job was to stand at the back of that airplane and push those supplies off and try to get them to land in the right spot. Of course, the landings in the right spot had to do a lot with how the pilot was flying as well.
Right.
He did 2 of those missions. He did not have to do that second one at all. He probably didn't have to do either one of them. They were considered extremely hazardous missions. And basically it was a volunteer thing. But the guys rotated, and most of them really wanted to do the job. And I found out later he had said that there was one mission that he went on before he came to meet me in Hawaii, but he never told me about it. He just said they thought it might be a little dangerous, and so one of the guys offered to take the mission for him so that nothing would happen to him when it was time for him to come see me. Well, I found out later it was one of those missions that they were talking about where he And they did lose planes on that mission. They lost several planes of different kinds. Because then once their planes went in and dropped the fuel, there was a jet plane, fighter plane that came in after them. And that fighter plane then, if anything, fell in the wrong place where it could get in enemy hands, they went in and destroyed it. So it was a 3-pronged mission, and his was in the middle of it. I never knew any of this until after he died, and my granddaughter Julie, her husband Josh, found it on the internet. It's on the internet to this day. You can find it.
Oh, neat.
And describing that mission, his name is right there with all the other members of the air crews. And so, but he was never one to talk about something like that. He'd rather talk about the time that they, took a bunch of stuff to an orphanage, or things that were good things. He didn't talk about the bad stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He just, I guess he didn't want to worry anybody. He didn't want anybody being concerned. I do know that there were a lot of people praying for him the whole time he was over there. And he was almost kind of known as a good luck charm. If he was on your crew, nothing happened to you. They might get a bullet here or two or there, but nothing major ever happened to any plane he was flying on. So, and I think prayer had a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
Lifting him up and saying, Lord, keep him safe and bring him home to his family. And Lord did that for us. So he ended out his career. He actually requested McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey because it was near his family for his last year in the military.
That's right. And I forgot that.
We looked into buying a house there, and they told him he didn't make enough money to buy a house. There's no way he could buy a house. He was, he was, tech sergeant on flight pay, all this stuff. They said, because in Pennsylvania, where his family lived, to buy a house there, you had to pay 2 years property taxes in advance, and they were steep.
Yeah.
Plus, make the down payment on the house, and all that. They said, they looked at him and said, you can't afford to buy a house.
Well, the neat thing is, compared to that, I remember talking with Linda about that. I had an amazing Boy Scout troop, and in the 1970s, I was camping regularly at Brindle Lake, which is right on McGuire Air Force Base and that whole complex right there.
When was that?
And in the 1970s, 68 to 72, something like that.
That's strange because we were there at McGuire that same time, okay? And I remember at one of my husband's trips overseas, he picked up a bunch of model airplane kits. A bunch of them, all the same kind, And they questioned him when he came through customs. Why do you have so many of these all the same? You take them back to son? No, I'm taking them back to my son's Boy Scout troop.
Really?
Yeah, really.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Huh. And so that was where it was one of the places we would camp. And my Boy Scout troop, the troop leaders were primarily World War II veterans.
Yeah.
And they were so neat. They said to us, you guys are going to get all the great parts of the military without all the sad and horrible things. So they really taught us how to put our kit together and how to survive and work and climb and paddle and hike and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Only unfortunate now our soldiers are back to that same thing where they're being exposed to some really awful, awful things.
Yeah, it's rough.
But that's the way the world goes, Not the way God wants it, but that's the way it goes.
Okay, well, are there any other military service stories that you can think of or of things that he mentioned?
Trying to think, but I'm not coming up with anything specific at this point. For the most part, everything went along smoothly because he was not involved in any wartime missions. One other neat mission he was involved in, though, was when he, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and his airplane was one that was chosen that they had the planes that went over and, took the pictures, spying to find out what actually had been installed there on the island. And he had to pick up the film there. I think it was Homestead Air Force. It was way down in South Florida. And zip it up to where we were in Massachusetts because of the reconnaissance technical group there, where they could take that film and develop it quickly and analyze it and see what was going on to find out whether missile things had actually been installed yet or what was going on. So that was an interesting one. They also made some really great time flying there. He said part of it was good flying and part of it we had a good tailwind. So, but that was one of those times. And of course, I knew what went on in that technical squadron because that's the one I belonged to when I was in there. Yeah.
I see.
And in fact, I might have been, at the point, if I had, quote, stayed in the military and that film had come in, I very probably would have been in that section working on that stuff, because I did have a top secret clearance, and they had offered me another job working not just inside the windowless part of the building, which was most of it, but in a vault in the middle of the building. A vault. That's how, and it would have required even higher security clearance to get in there. But I knew I was getting married. I knew I was not going to stay in the military. And, I thought, that they're going to spend a lot of money going back through and doing all this vetting of me again, and I'm not going to be there for very long. And the other person in line for the job was a young fellow who had just re-enlisted, planned to make the Air Force his career, was married, already had one child or two, and he really wanted that job. I said, look, give him that job. He wants to stay here with you. I know I'm not going to stay. I mean, I could have grabbed it, and maybe made another strike before I got it. What difference would it have made? And my life would have made no difference. But in his life could have made a big difference. So, yeah, I knew what went on in that building. There was a lot of stuff that went on in that building. And, things that I still don't talk about to this day. Unlike some people who should remain nameless.
Well, so there's a few little stories about life in the military and the man all around the planes. And remember, I'm sitting right next to a room that's got the most amazing plane models. I took a look at that Delta cargo plane. That's really amazing.
Detail there? I mean,
yeah,
that he did, because that's not. I mean, he took the basic airplane from a kit that was actually not a military plane, but a civilian plane, and converted it into that military plane.
Sure.
And, did what he did with it.
That's the kind of stuff I used to do.
They loved it when he took it that Airlines International. I mean, best of showdown. Phew, yeah. Right. Best airplane there.
And it's exciting to me because that's the kind of stuff that I used to do, but not to that scale. I mean, I did a little bit of fooling around, but this man had such technical ability that he could really get the job done. So, okay, till next time. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.